have words. Let's have words. Say what it's all about. We're gonna say what it's about. We're gonna talk it out.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Have Words, your Sunday talk show coming to you live from southern New Hampshire, broadcasting on WWHR Internet Media. And I am your host of Let's Have Words, Lara Samuels, and we are here every week at about 8 o'clock Eastern Time to talk. That's what we do here on Let's Have Words. So some of you that are new to the show may be asking yourselves, what is this show about? So basically what we do here is we have conversation. And lately I've been thinking about sort of, the mission statement of Let's Have Words. And I haven't quite formulated it yet, but what I'm thinking about is just how important conversation is in, just keeping the lines of communication open between people, how important that is. Just to maintain a certain level of civility and peace in our lives. So that's kind of why this show came into fruition, especially during a period when I feel like there's kind of a lack of communication, especially between people who are maybe in different political camps. And so the idea is that conversation, no matter what you're talking about, whether it be the mundane or the profound, whatever you're talking about, just having a conversation with other people and not cutting people out is a really important tool into maintaining some level of civility in the world. So that's kind of the overall mission of Let's Have Words. But of course, the day-to-day mission is just to have a conversation. So what we do here on Let's Have Words is we sometimes we have an open discussion where we pick a topic. The topic can range, anywhere from, politics, religion, philosophy, music, arts and culture, all kinds of different, science and technology, all kinds of different things that we discuss. For example, last week we talked about the Ukrainian crisis, which was a fascinating discussion. We got a little insight from somebody who is from that region. We've talked about all kinds of other things, environmental issues and political issues, and we've talked about, religious issues, all kinds of things. So the topics range. You never know what you're going to get on Let's Have Words. As long as we can have a conversation about it, we're open to discussing it. So that's one type of Let's Have Words where we have sort of an open discussion and we allow people to come on with their videos and into the studio and we have a discussion that way. And then the other type of show is the one that is like what we're going to do tonight, which is basically an interview where we invite somebody to come on and we discuss a topic with that person. And you as the audience can still participate because we like people to either, to chat in. Actually, I don't know if I invented that phrase, but to chat in by placing their comments and questions in the chat, and we will work them into the conversation as things proceed. So I'm going to invite our guest on pretty soon, but I did want to introduce the topic first. The topic tonight that I'm going to be talking with our guest about is the transformative power of music, specifically for people with autism spectrum disorder. But I do want to broaden the topic a little bit and talk just generally about the transformative power of music, for mental health, of all different kinds of positive effects of music on our mental health. So that's the topic for tonight. And I'm going to be talking to Ron Hill, who is a resident of San Diego, but through the magic of technology, he's actually able to come and talk to us via in the virtual studio. He's able to come on and have a discussion that way, which is amazing. So he is from San Diego, and he is a singer-songwriter. And he feels strongly that music is not just a hobby, right? It's something that really has influenced him in positive ways. So we're going to discuss all of that with Ron Hill. First, I wanted to mention some of my own feelings about this particular topic. This particular topic is dear to my heart because I too feel like music has had a profound effect on my life in a variety of ways. So, and music, it's been documented, and research is ongoing about sort of the neuroscience angle of this, that, the brain, that there are parts of the brain that are specifically devoted to interpreting music and experiencing music. And some of those parts of the brain are preserved in people who have different forms of dementia. They're the parts of their brain that can respond to music remain intact, because it's I got confused because I was suddenly large. Okay. The parts of the brain remain intact because there are specific parts of the brain that are devoted to music. And there's been people that have had severe, brain trauma that have benefited from musical therapy. People that have, epilepsy, and music therapy is used for people who are, stroke victims, and people with different forms of dementia, as I mentioned. But also, so really amazing effects of music to heal the brain, physically heal the brain. And also, for people with mental health disorders, of all kinds, mood disorders. And tonight we're going to be talking about ADHD, and we're going to be talking about autism spectrum, but also health disorders. Music can be incredibly therapeutic for people. Also, music, I was interested in the fact that music, in terms of as a form of communication, predates language or with words. This is Let's Have Words, but where we celebrate words. But before words, people communicated with sort of musical and music and gestures, like moving their arms around or making calls that were sort of musical in nature because they changed pitch and stuff, and we're much more emotional. It's sort of like an emotional language, right, where we communicate on an emotional level. And that, because of our language abilities, that sort of proto-language has kind of been, is not as pronounced. We don't really recognize it, but it's still there, right? So when we play music with one another, or we listen, even if we just listen to music, that's some sort of, it's communication on a whole different level, right? So just something that has been amazing for me. So when I was a child, I listened to a lot of music. Music has always been a big part of my life, just like it is for many people. And when I was, a teenager, I like to say that music, it was the only reason I survived my adolescence, because I had this outlet. And I wasn't really playing music at the time. I would sing, but I wasn't really playing any instruments or anything. But I would listen to music, and it would help me to not feel so alienated, and to feel more understood and less alone, and all of those things. And then as I got older, I started to play music with other people. About when I was in my 40s, I started to learn how to play some instruments, and I started playing music with other people. And that has been unbelievably transformative for me. Like, I feel like like my emotional health has improved so much since I started playing music, just in my ability to interact with others, and all of it. So I feel like music has had a tremendous impact on my mental health. I mean, I'm not suffering from autism spectrum disorder, but I do still feel like it, in a broader sense, music has been transformative for my overall well-being and mental health. So I really relate to this topic, and I'm excited to talk to Ron Hill about it. So Let's invite him on. So Ron Hill,
Thank you for
hi.
having me. Hi,
Hi.
thank you for having me.
It's delightful to have you. So
Yeah.
so let's start. Let's start by asking you. So do you? So I down here it says guest Happy Ron Hill. So first of all, I want to ask you what do you like to be called, and also where did you get that moniker, Happy
Well, it
Ron?
actually totally goes into our topic.
Okay,
I respond
good.
to anything that's a combination of happy, or Ron. So you can call me the Hapster. You can call me Happy. You can call me the Happy Man. You can call me Happy Ron. You can call me
Okay.
Happy Ron Hill. Any combination, as long as it's got the Hap or the Ron, I respond to
Okay. Got it. Got
it.
it. All
And
right.
actually,
Very versatile. Very
exactly.
versatile.
Well, people come up with all sorts of variations on my name. It's really funny. I mean, people have written a couple like joking songs about me, and one
Oh,
was
no
called
way.
Happy Ron, because I do a lot of open mics and people like to make up songs and stuff. So
Oh, neato.
it's been a so where I got my name was in
Yeah, where'd that come from?
95. I went to started studying this gentleman named Barry Neil Kaufman, who wrote a book called Happiness as a Choice, and he had an autistic son in the early 70s, and he was studying happiness at the time. And what he did was he decided that back then they had a really barbaric approach to people with autism. They would basically put you in a warehouse, electrical shock. They would, if you tried to stim, which self-stimulation, they would try to stop you from doing it. Drugs, and
Yeah.
it was very
A
barbaric.
lot of ignorance about what was
A,
happening.
a lot of
Yeah.
ignorance, and it was
Yeah.
born out of probably the idea of, autism is something bad, so you have to stop. But if you think about yourself, a young 2-year old kid, they don't know they're doing something unusual. They have no concept, especially if you're autistic. You don't understand these things. So what he
Right.
did was he decided to spend, I think, 14 hours a day, him and his family, with his son, and simply try to enter into their world. So autistic kids will tend to rock back and forth. So they would just sit next to him and start rocking.
Yeah.
And I think it took weeks. And then eventually the kid would be like this rocking. Eventually the kid would did one of these, like, there's somebody else over there. And then went back to it.
Yeah.
And they did
Yeah.
this for 2 years. And after 2 years, the child had developed all, quote, normal skills.
Oh.
And 18 years later, or 20 years later, the kid graduated from an Ivy League college, and right now is teaching about autistic spectrum and ways of dealing with it. And it really came from an approach of accepting that it's really just a difference. It's, people with
Right.
autism, they're different than other people. They haven't developed in a way. And his approach is controversial because it's not really science based, and it's not necessarily going to work for everyone to totally, quote, cure autism. But I have noticed over the last, since he started that, I'm sure there are lots of people involved in this, that there's been a different approach to it. Rather than fighting against the child, more working, really starting with love and acceptance and helping them to develop a connection, because
Right.
just like
Requires a lot of patience, it sounds like. Requires a lot of
absolutely. I
patience.
mean,
Yeah.
to do what he did would require superhuman patience, which I am certain I don't have. But
Yeah.
but I have my bass player has an autistic daughter and they do similar things, not quite as extreme. The mother is a full-time mom, and just and you can see the daughter. She's still nonverbal at the age of 11, but she definitely makes these very incremental changes, and they're kind of happy in their life, accepting her as she is. And that's controversial because some people say, well, it's terrible that they have and so it's just takes a lot of love and support to try and sort it all out.
Well, it seems
So
to me that there's probably a lot more, like there are a lot of a variety of therapies for people with
absolutely.
disorder, but with autism. But you're saying that some people still feel like treating it as something that is a disorder and needs to be fixed is still a prevalent
It's prevalent, and
mindset.
it is prevalent, and there is a somewhat of a validity to it, because being autistic especially if you're nonverbal, it's very difficult. And,
Yeah.
but you can't really shock it out of somebody. You can't
Right.
really, it's like any,
You have to guide them out,
yeah,
coax them
yeah, you
out
have to lead them,
slowly.
or
Yeah.
love them as they are, and
Yeah.
then hopefully have them reach out to you. And
Like you said, start with acceptance and then move from there. Right.
exactly. And I think almost everyone's kind of coming around to that perspective now.
Yeah.
Some people go almost the opposite extreme, that you can't even call it a disorder because that's disrespecting the kid, and
Yes.
you know,
I've
it's
heard
it's like
that.
exactly. So it's like it's kind of like, I think as long as you start with love, I think it's going to work out okay. So
Yeah.
what happened with me is I went to his retreat. I studied his books, and he had a retreat. He has a place in Massachusetts where he teaches happiness.
Mhm.
And I went to another retreat, and they said, pick a name that you want to have during the weekend. And I said, well, maybe I should try some of this happiness stuff, because I was really unhappy. And so I had everyone call me Happy. So I had a name
Yeah.
tag, Happy. And I noticed that as I walked around, everyone goes, how's it going, Happy? Hey, Happy. And it's like it like pushed my little happiness button,
Oh, interesting.
and then it's actually obviously a great icebreaker, and people, and so it helped me just taking on the name Happy sort of helped me to it start to find ways of forming a connection with people, because it starts with a positive connection.
Sure.
So that was in
So you're
95.
saying that the reason you you went to this seminar was because you were not happy. You were unhappy at the time.
Yeah, the first 30 years of my life, I was pretty miserable.
First 30
And
years, you say.
30 years of my life. This would be around when I was 30, and I was a
Okay.
pretty miserable person. I had basically undiagnosed autism spectrum and undiagnosed PTSD. I had a hip problem where my hip was deformed, so it caused this constant anxiety just in walking, and that's a
I'm
little
sorry.
known. It's a little known cause of PTSD, and I didn't understand either one. And I kind of went through a really dark period where actually went to a therapist for help, and I was shamed and judged over
Oh,
being
gosh.
introverted, and it really sent me into a really dark place.
Mm.
And so all this stuff was really like a godsend. I kind of became a personal growth junkie for 30 years, I guess, but like 2 years.
Are you still a personal growth junkie?
I yeah, I do. But
Yeah?
although I've integrated it, I'm actually doing a year-long training program in something called organic intelligence, which is about,
Ooh,
if you've heard of emotional intelligence, it's
sure.
about how to become, connected to your to to your body and to the world around you, and that's been
Oh.
very helpful. So I've always done something. Now I consider my personal growth to be a combination of going to that type of workshops and doing music and living my life, all three. For a while I was just doing the personal growth stuff, and then I branched out into music, and then and I
So that's also what I'm wondering. So how does this dovetail with your musical? So you went through a period where you feel like you were in a very dark place, and then you went to this seminar, this person who wrote Happiness is a Choice, and you learned how to be happy, or you feel like that you were successful, so this person's approach was successful for you.
it was the start. I mean, I think I've his approach is, to start with love, and it's a very mental approach. And then I've actually, like with organic intelligence and other things I've studied, they talk
Yep.
about getting in contact with your body, and also getting in contact through the world around you. Like a lot of meditation nowadays is you go up into your mind and you go off into the cosmos, and which is all cool, but which is
Nothing
fine.
wrong with
But
that. Nothing wrong
nothing
with
wrong with
getting
that,
positive.
unless you're somebody who's already kind of in your mind a lot.
Unless you're already
So,
there, yeah.
so the meditation I do now, the organic intelligence, is really more about developing your senses.
Yeah.
Like, how do you connect to the world?
Yeah.
If you think about someone who's traumatized in any way, short form, they're usually it's described as a trouble staying present in the moment.
Is that similar to like mindfulness meditation, where you're sort of aware, you try to make yourself more aware of the now,
Absolutely. And what I think what
Yeah.
organic intelligence brings into it is the idea of there's a part of our nervous system biologically that is designed to keep us present in the moment. There's the dorsal vagal and the dorsal ventral. And one of them is to disconnect you from the world to keep you from being traumatized. And the other is to connect you to the world. So this is like a biological process of trying to, become more connected to the world around you. And to me, it's just more specific that way that I think a lot of the other stuff kind of talk about, but I like the way this, so it's what I'm currently studying.
Yeah, interesting. So you do seem like a happy person to me.
I'm actually a lot happier than I've ever been. I'm actually quite literally since 95.
Yeah.
It's been a solid leveling up of,
Good.
and especially I got my hips replaced. I had bad hips, and that actually would create a lot of trauma for me.
Yeah.
And I still am not, I always admired people like, I admire people like Will Smith before what happened recently.
Oh no!
That was really shocking to me because of this. I admire those people that are just like the life of the party. They're because there's still there's always a higher level of joy to bring. So I feel like I'm higher than I'd like to be, but I may not eat. I'm not necessarily the happiest person, I mean, maybe I am, I don't know. But I'm happier than I was.
Yeah.
So there's always a higher level and a higher level to go. And certainly most people, one of my mentors talked about how he met one of the biggest songwriters in the world. And she was like, she was probably autistic spectrum or something like that. She was like this, but when she would talk about songwriting, she'd light up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that they have this areas that when they talk about them, they get very excited. And then I'm like that with music and with autistic spectrum. And so that's the area I feel most comfortable talking about.
All right. Well, let's get into that. But hey, so just to pause for a minute to remind everybody, if you're listening, we're talking to Happy Ron, and we're talking about the transformative power of music, specifically for people on the autism spectrum range, the autistic spectrum. However, if we want to broaden the topic a little bit and just kind of talk about the transformative power of music, period, that's good too, So if you have a question or comment and you'd like to chime in to the discussion, please feel free to write that in the chat and you can join us. And we were talking with Ron about his, just sort of his history a little bit, about how he came to this conclusion. But we haven't really talked about music. So exactly when did you start? You didn't start playing music until later, or did you? Were you one of those people who played music when you were younger and then got back into it, or was it just?
I made efforts when I was younger. I always wanted to be. I first heard the Beatles in 1980, right before John Lennon was murdered, and I always wanted to, but because of my situation, I was one of those. I was so disconnected from my body that I couldn't really. The idea of hand-eye coordination and singing, and there's all this tension in my body. So I didn't get into it really. I didn't seriously start doing it until I was 30, and not really seriously until I was 40, and not almost professional level until I was like 50. I literally, it's been I really didn't get into it later in life, and I haven't really been that good until the last 7 years or so.
Right. And autism, of course, is a spectrum, which is
absolutely.
So, of course, which means that people experience it very differently. There's a huge range from very severe to mild. So, where do you play? How do you experience autism? How did you experience it, or do you experience that?
Well, I would say that when I was younger, I was kind of on the mid spectrum. I was certainly not nonverbal. I was certainly able to talk and communicate, but for instance, during my 20s, I didn't have any friends. I mean, zero friends. I worked at Costco, Price Club at the time, and I didn't really have any.
You just wouldn't talk to people?
I didn't really know how to. I didn't know how to maintain friendships. I was probably fairly weird or unconventional for most people's sake. I felt tremendously lonely and a lot of shame around stuff. And so I was, and then when I started making all the changes now, I mean, I've spent so much time doing things like this, and I've been on stage 3,000 times. I used to be a professional gambler. I've done all sorts of things so that I'm for someone on the autistic spectrum, I'd probably be considered really, really high functioning now.
Now, but
Yeah, now,
because you sort of healed yourself, like you did these
absolutely.
things
Yeah,
deliberately as therapy to help pull yourself out.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it
yeah.
sounds funny because people oftentimes think of, rock and roll and gambling as destructive things, but in a way, they kind of saved my soul.
Isn't that
You know?
interesting? That's a great concept. Yeah. Hey, so I guess we have a question. Do we know how music affects the brain, autism-wise or in general? So do you know? So I think Conrad is asking, like, do you know of any sort of research studies or anything like that that have been done on this particular
Well,
topic as
certainly.
far as?
There's a, I have a song that actually talks about this.
Oh,
There's a, when people sing together, there's a hormone that's actually released in the brain.
yeah,
It's called oxytocin.
yeah.
And it's the trust hormone, and it's created when in the act of making love, in parent-child bond,
Uh-huh.
and in the act of singing together. It actually, when you actually sing with a group of people, it creates a biological uh, connection of trust with people, assuming you're, of connection. And that's to me the most powerful way that music affects the brain.
Yeah.
I actually sing for autistic kids sometimes,
Oh, do you?
and it's and nonverbal kids, or barely verbal kids. And it's interesting when you perform for them, and I do mainly sing-alongs with them, of course. Um, you almost don't get the sense, because you're not communicating with words. You're communicating through pure emotion. So you almost don't get the sense that you're singing. The sing-alongs are almost no different than my sing-alongs with more conventional people.
Right.
So, and that's, except for occasionally you'll hear a strange sound coming from one of the kids.
Right.
Aside from that, it's like, oh, this is like singing normal, because you
Yeah.
go into this a state of connection.
Yes,
And
you do.
that's one of the ways.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, you were actually I enjoyed what you were saying earlier, because you talked about how music predates language.
Yeah.
But also, if you think about it, with animals, there's no animals that talk, but birds sing.
What they sing. Mm-hmm.
They sing.
Yeah,
And
and other animals too, right? Too.
and other animals too.
And it's
if you-
emotional. It's almost like there's a huge emotional component to it, and it's almost like a different level of communication.
Yeah, it's a different level of communication. And all the studies say that most communication is through emotion,
Yeah.
body language, and then the words are actually a relatively small part for
Hmm.
human interaction. I think it's like 7% of the words. Most people, if you talk to them, they're noticing your body posture, they're noticing your emotion.
Right.
And unless you're having a purely intellectual discussion, they're less impacted by the actual words.
And isn't that part of the diagnosis of autism, is people who have autism have a really hard time sort of understanding those cues, those sort of nonverbal body cues. That's part
Absolutely.
of it, right? That's part of the diagnosis.
They have difficulty understanding the nonverbal cues and the cues that they're sending out themselves.
Oh,
So they have difficulty communicating with through the nonverbal, and sometimes the verbal as well, but especially the nonverbal cues, and that's why it can be a little disturbing if you don't understand it, because they're not really as present, or like I don't think I looked anybody in the eye the first 30 years of my life.
wow.
And now I've am closer to what a conventional typical neurotypical person would do. And in some ways I'm more high functioning than a lot of people, because I've spent so much time doing music, and so much time that I've developed these parts of me very, very relatively slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, because so Lois actually has a comment here. Ron, what do you think is important for neurotypicals to know when interacting with somebody on the spectrum?
Well, the main thing
Good
is,
question, Lois.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
If they don't, the important thing to know is, if someone's seems disconnected to you, it probably has nothing to do with you. That's simply the way they are.
Mm.
Like, I would talk to people some way, and I'd be like this, and I would be like totally listening to their words like this, but people would think like, how come this guy isn't looking at me or whatever? But I would be like really trying to connect as best I can to someone.
Yeah.
And someone who's further along the autistic spectrum, they're, they may want to talk to you. That may be, they may not want to, or they may want to. It's a lot harder to tell sometimes, but they may want that connection, or they may desperately for it.
Yeah.
And but it's, so the important thing is not to judge, to draw any conclusions about what they're feeling, unless they actually say I hate you or something like that. Some people actually thought I didn't like them, or that I was stuck up, or that I was whatever. And for the most part, that sometimes I didn't like people, of course, but
Right.
sometimes, so that's the main thing, is just to, and you don't have to talk down to people, or just try and talk to them as calmly and slowly as possible. I tend to find that it helps to just, not talk down, but talk kind of slowly, and, like almost like you talk to someone that might be easily startled, because they might be. You may move a weird way and it might trigger them. I mean, autistic people tend to be highly triggered.
Yeah.
And
They're very sensitive to
Yeah.
environmental stimulus.
And what happens is there's a tendency to become overwhelmed, so they shut down. So it seems like they're not there. But one of the theories that I like the best, and this is certainly true for me, is that it really is that they're overwhelmed. They're not present. They're too present. They don't have enough of a real boundary. Yeah, they're over present, and they can't handle all the stimulation. Like I used to work at Costco, and it was pretty much hell for me in that way, because at Price Club, there's constant stimulation,
Yeah.
And my goal in my life now that I've retired is to design a life where I don't have to go to the grocery store very often, or I can go enough that I kind of enjoy it, like, half an hour at a time, 45, not, that I don't get too stimulated. Actually, another thing that happened with me, and I is when the mask mandate came in, I had real trouble wearing masks. I mean, I still can't wear a mask more than 30 minutes at a time. And that's very common
Because of the physical stimulation on your face, or because of
I think the claustrophobia aspect. Even I think the pressure on the back of my neck was hard. So the pressure here, the pressure there, and I mean, I had a bad leg all my life, and yet which was very painful. But this mask thing actually, really drove me crazy. And I eventually realized if I got a face shield, like a clear plastic face shield,
that worked better for you.
Yeah, it's almost like not wearing a mask. It was literally just a contraction here.
Yeah.
And we recently had our dog here. We took him for surgery, and when he got out of the surgery, they put one of those cones on him so he couldn't scratch. His surgery was right here.
Yeah.
So he couldn't scratch. And as soon as he left the hospital, the animal hospital, he started spinning around on the ground trying to get that cone off of him. I said, all right, my dog's claustrophobic just like I am.
You can relate to your dog on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So music in particular, though, like, what do you think music actually does for people on the autistic spectrum? Do you think it improves, like, for example, their social interactions?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a more extreme example. My bass player's daughter, she will play a little 7-second clip on her iPad. She has an iPad, and she's nonverbal, but she can use that iPad. She can like do functions on it, and she'll play that 7-second clip 100 times in a row. It's called stemming. It's stimulate, where you're trying to stimulate yourself. Right. So for whatever
through
reason,
repetition, it's like repetitive motion.
Yeah, most people on the autistic spectrum, they get attracted to things they can do repetitively. Like for me, and this is totally subconscious, I didn't know this on my part, but I worked at Costco where I did the same job of simply taking order. I was a cashier, which is the same thing over and over. Now there's variations, of course. Right. And if anybody interrupted my little pattern and tried to talk to me when I was doing my job, it would send me into a tailspin.
Right.
I'm of course relatively high functioning.
Yeah.
And of course, what do songwriters do? You spend all your time creating a little 3-minute thing, and I spend a month. It takes on average a month uh, to make a 3-minute recording for me. And what am I? And then I go up and I play that song, the same 3-minute thing at once, and I'm kind of happy in that little space.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's, with music, there's repetition in music. I mean, that's part
Absolutely.
of it. That's part of music is that repetition. So that's helpful. I'm wondering if too it helps you to communicate with other people, or helps you maybe have another way of emotionally connecting to people that way you
Absolutely.
don't have that necessarily otherwise.
Yeah, the thing that really sold me on music was when I started doing sing-alongs.
Yeah.
Because I would
singing with
actually
people.
interact with people. And when I first started doing it, I would sing like this. And I'd
Yeah.
have my eyes closed and I was afraid to look at the audience. I was so overwhelmed. But nobody really noticed because I did these kind of raspy, funny songs. So people thought that was just my style. But I was really going, I'm going to push the song out of me. And I would go sing along, terribly happy. And everyone would go, terribly happy, terribly happy. And that interaction that you get with people, you know, and I've done this, with 100 people in a room, and that's just something it's so powerful, and it's so it's really something it's one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah, and I think music too. It's almost like so I like to say I jam. Like I play with music. I play music with other people a lot, and I always point out. I made the observation that I can jam with somebody for 10 years and not know anything about them at all. Like I know nothing about them. I don't know if they have kids. Did they go to college? I have no idea. But I feel like I know them really well because I've been playing music with them for 10 years. And so it's like just a different connection. It's not a connection based on words. Once again, it's a connection based on just sort of emotions, and it's very healthy. It's just a different kind of relationship, and it's very healthy.
Well, I like one of the ideas of organic intelligence that I study is, we are really biological creatures. We're really biological creatures. And this upper brain function stuff is relatively new. And our society is based nowadays, the nerds take over the world pretty much nowadays. The people it used to be, it was the biggest, strongest person that would take over the world. Now, brawn is almost irrelevant in terms of power. And now it's the brain power. And that's great.
Right.
And that's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with our brain power. There's nothing wrong. One of the great advantages of being mentally focused or kind of up in your head like an autistic person, that's wonderful. That's a great thing to have. But we still have this biology that, the more we can experience life on the mental level, the emotional level, the physical level, and then our connection to each other, that's the fullness of life. If you have a limitation on one of those, and you're not living life as fully. Right. And a lot of people are really just about the connection aspect of life, and that's wonderful too. That's so I'm trying to continue to find a balance between all of the above, and I'm very fortunate that I live in a time that, especially with the internet now, where if you're an essential egghead like I am, you can get a lot. You get a lot of information, a lot of power, a lot of interaction with people just through the computer.
Yeah. Well, do you consider yourself? I mean, we're having a conversation right now, and you seem very engaged in the conversation. Do you consider yourself healed?
I consider myself that. It's a good question. I still think I'm autistic spectrum. I'm just super high functioning.
You're just super high functioning.
Yeah, I'm relatively super high functioning in a lot of areas, not in all areas. When I was working at Costco, and talking to recently, a couple of years ago, a lot of people understandably thought I was very aloof and not connected, and I didn't really, because I was so overwhelmed in that kind of environment. And there are other situations where they're not my forte, that maybe I will develop along the way, So I'm just very blessed that I'm very blessed that. The important thing about the autistic spectrum is to look at it as a way of understanding the baseline of where you are, but always leave open the hope that you can develop the aspects of yourself that are not developed.
Yeah.
So which
Right.
which may not be possible for everyone on the spectrum. There may be people that for whatever reason they can't develop, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of people certainly can, and that's where hope lies.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So right now, people, we're talking to Happy Ron, and we're discussing the transformative power of music, especially for people on the autistic spectrum. But we can broaden that conversation and talk just kind of in general about transformative power of music overall. I think music has a lot of beneficial effects for mental health in general, and positive effects on our cognition and our social interaction and emotional health and all kinds of dimensions. So please, if you want to write questions, comments in the chat, please join the conversation, and we were happy to entertain some questions from the audience. That would be great. So we already had some good questions, and some more would be fabulous. So Ron, let's talk about so your music in particular, so you're a songwriter.
Right. That's the
So-
number one thing I
Yeah.
consider myself to be. A lot of people look at me as a performer, and I'm honored by that. I consider myself a songwriter first, a performer second, a singer maybe a distant third, and a guitar player a little bit below that.
Right.
I'm good enough at the third and fourth, but I consider myself to be really, really good in the first and second.
In the songwriting.
The songwriting, because I'm very,
performing.
very serious about it. I mean,
Yeah.
before you'll hear any of my songs, I take them to my mentors, and we'll actually get feedback on them, and I'll fine tune them down to the syllable, and I'll get into
wow.
hour-long discussions as to whether or not the word or the word the should be used.
Right.
You know, I mean,
It's important, right? It can make all the difference in a song. It's true.
Absolutely, especially
Or
if
a
you want
poem.
to if you want to communicate. If you
Mhm.
want to just express, that's fine. That's great too. But if you really want a song that's going to
Yeah.
communicate to the largest number of people, learning the craft, there's initial inspiration, and then there's the crafting and fine tuning and tweaking of a song. And people always tell me that my songs sound like, they're quote very natural, and they sound like, oh, you don't ever use a pitch correction on your voice, and you don't ever you must, these songs just must come from your soul. And I'm like, oh, okay, believe that if you want to believe that.
So you don't think so? You don't think that there's your songs
they
come
they
from your soul?
do they do, but I don't believe in the idea of that the first draft that comes out of your soul is always the best draft. So they do come from my soul.
So it originates with your soul, but then you have to do some
Then you tweak it.
tweaking, you fine tuning.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga put it the best. He says, when you first start to write a song, sometimes it comes out in a barf, and then later on you can go through and fine tune it, but you should always respect the original barf.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So Conrad's asking, what about using music for what are you talking about, Conrad? You got to clarify that question.
Military marches and dancing.
And dancing. Well, dancing
Dancing is awesome, man.
Dancing is amazing. So
I
I was recently reading about dancing and how dancing, nobody, we talk about human qualities. I mean, humans dance to a beat. Like birds don't dance to a beat,
Huh? I wonder.
Chipmunks don't dance to a beat. It's very human to move to a beat.
Right, and the beat actually connects you. It's a way of physically connecting you to a group of people. There's the sound, but if you're all doing the same beat, if you're all clapping,
and that's the repetition too that you were mentioning earlier.
It actually creates a physical kind of channel level connection between people, because you're physically moving in a similar way.
Right.
And that's actually, I'm actually very,
Synchronicity.
in 95, I went to some of the retreats I went to, did this, introduced me to this woman, Gabriel Roth, who does this kind of free form dancing technique. And she would say, okay, first you dance with your ears, dance with your shoulders, dance with your elbows.
Interesting.
That's what and it actually literally was like, its head bones connected to the tailbone. It actually literally was one of the things that got me grounded into my body, because I was like,
Right.
and I
Synchronizing all
realized,
that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, that I'm more, as opposed to someone just doing, a very stiff kind of thing. I can dance free form and do all these little things, and I very much enjoy that. I'm not very good anything that's like a structured dance where you have to learn a form. I still struggle with that because it's very it's very I find it very overwhelming. But freeform dance I love.
Because you have to have the discipline to actually learn the moves or whatever.
You have to be disciplined, and my hand-eye, the development of my hand-eye coordination and all that stuff is still, it still can be quite challenging for me. That's where I get triggered into a lot of anxiety and stuff due to all of my stuff. So I've had two girlfriends now that have tried to teach me. They were very good dancers that have tried to teach me to do structured dance, and so far they haven't succeeded.
But dancing for people with autism is probably very good, a very good therapy for the same reason music is.
Yeah, I remember once there's a guy that he used to go to the open mics, and he was quite literally, probably technically the worst musician I've ever heard, and he had some sort of social disorder. I'm not sure how he'd be. And one time he was at there was something where there was a pounding dance beat, and we're all there, and people were commenting because it's like his body would kind of move involuntarily to the beat. He wasn't really trying to dance, but it was like boom, boom. So even he was kind of getting into it, even though he was very, very stiff, like I used to be.
Yeah. Lois has a question. Do people on the spectrum have special challenges in forming romantic relationships? Lois.
No, that's a great question.
That is a great question. Hit it. What do you think?
They do. I didn't really have a girlfriend the first 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
I didn't date. I didn't have relationships. And
because that communication piece. I mean, it's
communication piece, and it's not necessarily the most attractive thing on a pure romantic or sexual basis to be disconnected from the world, unless somebody's really attracted to a brain, which is fine too. So and it's one of the things that I've had several really healthy. I'm in a wonderful relationship now, and it is very challenging for people because they have all the regular challenges and then a whole host of challenges on top of that.
Right, and like you say, and for somebody who's neurotypical, especially to develop a relationship with somebody who's maybe not, there has to be so much work involved in sort of, understanding, people's. Because if your nonverbal cues are not really the same, there's a whole host of things you have to learn about that person before you can even think about getting close to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's all sorts of challenges. I believe it was Amy Schwimmer, or I forget her name. Has
comedian.
I think it was her. I don't remember. She said recently she has a boyfriend who's autistic spectrum, and she said that a lot of things that made him autistic is what made her love him.
So, there you go.
So because there's it's if you're very intellectual, if you're very thoughtful about what you say, there's things about it that can be very charming, and so.
But it's hard for people, I think, that are sort of attuned into the sort of like the nonverbal cues that we're used to interpreting a certain way. You have to sort of, if you want to develop a relationship with somebody on the autistic spectrum disorder, you have to sort of figure out how not to respond naturally, because like if you think, oh, this person, like if you have sort of an interpretation of somebody's body language that's sort of natural for you, you have to sort of unteach yourself. Like that's you'll interpret it one way, and then you'll have to sort of think to yourself, well, I can't really interpret it that way because you have to constantly, seems like a lot of work to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had women in the past that I
Yeah.
mean, I've always been like a nice person. People always like me. I've had looking back in my 20s, I had several women that basically kind of threw themselves at me, and I was too stupid to
Oh,
notice.
right. You didn't notice because you didn't notice the non.
I
You
didn't
didn't.
notice the
You didn't
clues.
know that. Notice the hair twirling.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, one time,
Oh.
and this was when I was like
Yeah.
20. A woman, and what's weird is I always remember these things later.
Yeah.
Like years later, I'll remember something as I've developed. This one woman invited me into her car. She sat in her car, and we were talking. I didn't really know her that well, and then she took her seat and leaned back like this,
Yeah.
and was talking to me like this. And she
Yeah.
basically wanted me to jump her bones.
Yeah.
And then I remember
The
at the end, she put,
universal sign for jump my
pretty
bones.
much so. And
Yeah.
I remember her sitting there going, "Oh well," and she was basically saying, "Oh, this guy's too stupid to know what's going
Yeah.
on."
But it's because you didn't pick up on those nonverbal cues.
I didn't know. If she had said to
Yeah.
me, "Hey, you want to get busy or something?" I
Yeah.
would have picked up. But you had to spell it out.
But
You know?
and on the other side though, I guess neurotypical people, would misread, like they would think maybe you didn't like them because of a way that you treated them when actually you did, like because of those nonverbal cues that they're typical, that
Yeah, absolutely. Because
typically convey certain emotions.
you're
Yeah.
clueless, exactly. And
Yeah.
and on the opposite side, like this gentleman I was telling you about at the open mic, he would creep out. A lot of women would be creeped out by him because he would just say hello, and he'd walk up to two women having a private conversation, and he would just sit there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now he just wanted to be part of it. I knew him
Yeah.
well enough to know that he was completely harmless,
Right.
but it would be
Right.
really
But if
really
you didn't know
disturbing.
him, yeah.
It was really disturbing. He'd creep
Yeah.
me out even though I knew the story. I would be like, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to this girl right now. Could you go get lost, buddy? I'm trying to. You're messing with my game, buddy."
Yeah.
But they would know it, and it would be really, it would be really disturbing to them because they didn't understand who he was and what he was doing there.
Right. So in the last few minutes, I just we want to. I just want to ask you about your music in particular. So you came out with a CD in 2008, right?
Yeah, I came
Is
out.
that
with
the only one, or you
It's
made
my
other
only
ones, or-
it's my only official CD. I've been releasing individual songs
Yeah.
on YouTube and on SoundCloud and things like that. Basically,
Right.
YouTube, Facebook, all that stuff. You can hear my
What do you
music.
like to write about? I read some of your. I've heard some of your music, and I've read some of your titles and stuff. Like, what do you like to write about?
A large part of the songs are essentially about. A t- my theme song is called "Terribly Happy,"
Yeah.
and
That's your hit, right?
that's my
your
hit.
hit.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the song I played.
Yeah.
There's that song and two or three others that I played more than 1,000 times on stage. I used to go places and they'd want to hear that we'd have one song you could play. Hey, we want to hear "Terribly Happy" again. So I'd play the same song at the same place for 10 years in a row, and they would still
Wow.
wanted to hear it because it was like the theme song for the open mic or whatever.
Right.
But a lot of my songs are kind of about the quest to become happier, the quest to develop. And again, I'd make the differentiation. If you look at like Farrell or Will Smith or somebody like that, they're actually expressing this pure happiness. Oh, I'm happy, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of my songs are more like, I'm terribly happy. I'm trying to get happier. Maybe I'm not totally there yet, but I'm trying to
Yeah.
move forward. And I call it happiness for the real world. 'Cause I don't claim to be like the happiest person in the world. I never have said that. I claim I'm trying to evolve and become happier. So it's really about that kind of, if there's a theme throughout all my songs, it's about that kind of journey. And it was actually when I wrote Terribly Happy, it was a big relief for me because on a certain, I co-wrote it with two other people.
Yeah.
On a subconscious level, I was still kind of judging myself. Hey, my name's Happy, but I'm not happy enough, or my music isn't happy enough, blah, blah. And what happened was it kind of was a relief to say, okay, I don't have to be happy all the time. I don't have to be the happiest person in the room. I just want to be happier than I was last year.
Okay. Yeah. So, you're still making music now? You still writing songs?
Absolutely.
And-
Yeah. I just released
What's your latest song?
my latest song is about our dog Scooter. And it goes, I just want to hang with Scooter. I just want to hang with Scooter. Don't care about no bimbos, and I don't need no fancy clothes. I just want to hang with Scooter. I just want to. And then in the recording, where I go, I just want to hang with Scooter, it goes, Ruff, there's a dog bark, ruff, on every time I say scooter, it goes ruff. And you can find that on YouTube and on Facebook and all of the above. And I'm actually
Yeah.
making I just released it and it was played on 91X, the local station
Oh,
in San
nice.
Diego.
Nice.
And I want to release the version I have is a little bit more of an adult song, and I want to make it into a complete kids song with like no bimbos in it and stuff like that, but kids language, because it's actually it's like a lot of my music. It has a childlike.
Yeah. So what's this South Park cross between Mr. Rogers and South Park? That's how your music is described. So
Yeah, well, that's what happened was in when I got into music in the '90s, I started to write kind of edgy, a little bit of edgy songs, trying to get on South Park. I wrote a song. Uh, I don't know if I could even say the title here.
You can. This is an adult show.
Okay, well, I wrote a song called "Dickless Wonder."
Okay.
Are you gonna be the one to show her some thunder? Are you just another dickless wonder? You gotta seal the deal or pull a blunder and forever be known as a dickless wonder. And I wrote a couple songs
funny.
like that. And I was so shocked by what I wrote,
Yeah.
because it's basically me chastising myself and other people that were awkward. And the idea of the song was, hey, sometimes women want you to make, it came out of a situation where a woman was telling me that she wanted someone to make a move and they didn't. So I said, hey, so I wrote it to kind of, so it was just funny and cute. But I wrote a couple songs that were like that. And then I kind of got to the point where all my songs were a little edgy, a little biting. And I didn't like that. So I said, I'm going to just write I'm going to write nice songs. And then I wrote.
That's your Mr. Rogers side.
Right, yeah, and I wrote a song called "Don't Stop Playing," "Terribly Happy," "Pretty on the Inside," and so if you listen to my album, it's almost half and half between those two types of songs.
Yeah,
and even those Mr. Rogers songs still have a little bit of a bite to them, because I came from this kind of rougher place.
Yeah.
So so that's where the Mr. Rogers meets South Park comes from. And I actually, when I've been.
But have you written a song that encompasses both, or is it just like you've got your Mr. Rogers tunes and your South Park tunes, and they don't actually meet together?
No, I think I wrote a song. It's called "I'm Not Here to Show You What to Do and How. I'm here to make the pain go away right now. I'm just here to be here for you. I'm just here to be here for you." And I wrote that song as a Mr. Rogers song. It was very slow.
Sounds very Mr. Rogers, sure.
It's very Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
But I got drunk one time and I went up with my band and we played it faster in my old raspy voice. So it became a drunken Mr. Rogers song. I'm just here to be here for you. I'm just here to be here for you. And people, it's like one of my top 5 songs now.
Oh, there you go.
Not the softer version, but the edgier, bitey version. So,
you think Mr. Rogers ever had a drink? He never.
I don't think he ever did.
No.
He literally was what he claimed to be. The new movie they did about him a couple years ago.
So far, there hasn't been anything dark that's come out about Mr. Rogers. So far, he is exactly the person that.
Well, I think
that's what I loved about him.
Yeah, I mean, he literally talked. That's the way he spoke. He spoke in a very kind, kind way.
There haven't been any sort of like dark secrets or anything like that have come out about him.
No, he was a Presbyterian. I think he was a Presbyterian minister, and there was a rumor for a long time that he was a Rambo type person in Vietnam, and people wanted to believe it because you couldn't believe someone would ever be that nice. But the problem is, his entire life, every month has been accounted for. He lived in the same town all of his life, and so none of that's true. People have trouble believing that,
it exists. So one more. So before we get out of here, I just want to ask you. So where can people go to hear your music? So if we want to listen,
you remember, you just do a search for Happy Ron, one word, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Reverb Nation, Spotify. At any place, just remember Happy Ron, one word. If you do Happy Space Ron, you're gonna find Ron Hermione from those movies, the Harry Potter movies or something. Just for Happy Ron, one word, you can find me everywhere, or just happyron.com.
Okay, and there are a lot of videos and things you can songs you can listen to on your website.
Yeah, my goal is to make a live video and a studio video for every one of my songs, and I'm pretty close to that goal.
Oh, nice.
So there's like two. 2 copies of most of my songs up on Facebook and on YouTube and all that. And I spent a lot of time putting visuals. One of my newer songs, I synced it up with video of Baby Yoda, and it told the whole Baby Yoda story. And that actually, and the song happened to completely match the story of the Mandalorian in the first 2 seasons of that show.
Yeah.
And that was my first song to ever win an award.
Congratulations.
Yeah, a YouTube channel called Creative Sauce voted it the song of the month and then song of the year at the end of the year, which was a big honor for me.
That's amazing. All right, well, happy Ron. It's been great having you. We'd love to talk to you some more, but we got to get out of here. And just amazing talking to you you're just a great songwriter. I've heard a lot of your stuff, and I really appreciate you as a songwriter. And I also appreciate your life, your view of life, all of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right. So very, very cool. Let's Have Words this week. We talked to Happy Ron Hill from San Diego, coming to us from San Diego, because that's what we can do these days. It's pretty amazing if you think about it. We talked to him about music, the transformative power of music. Also a little bit about his singing, singer-songwriter. So we got some comments coming at rapid fire, so I'm trying to pay attention to them. Okay, so we talked about his songwriting and how music has been an amazing healing force for him in his life. And I appreciate all the questions and comments that came from callers. That was awesome. We had a great conversation. And so Let's Have Words is a talk show, and every week we have a conversation, whether it's an open discussion or an interview like we did today. And we need people to come on to the show for interviews. So if you have a topic that you think would be good for Let's Have Words, we entertain a wide array of topics. So please write to us at wwhrmedia@gmail.com, and please just tell us what you want to talk about, and we'll figure out a way to discuss it and have you on. And in the meantime, everybody, keep the lines of communication open.
Let's have